I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not really. Just shot off a vague text to my group chat and muted my phone. I figured if I didn't hear the familiar ding of pity or fake concern, maybe I'd finally get some silence. The truth is, I needed to be away from all of it. The city, the noise, him. 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was in a relationship I believed was solid. Late-night ramen, dumb movies, whispered plans about the future. Then came the lie. Then came the silence. And then came me, sitting in the middle of my apartment floor, wondering when I'd stopped recognizing the person in the mirror. So here I am on the edge of nowhere. Just trees, wind, and sky. I parked the car where the paved road ended and walked about a mile up an old trail with my pack bouncing on my shoulders. Every crunch of gravel under my boots felt like peeling off another layer of the noise I'd carried. The air here was different. Crisp, pine-laced, clean in a way city air never could be. I found a spot by a stream. Not too close, but close enough to hear it moving, gurgling over the rocks like it had something to say. I set up camp just before sunset, pitched my tent, unpacked the essentials, gathered wood. By the time darkness started to crawl through the trees, I had a small fire going. It cracked and popped like an old friend clearing his throat before telling a good story. The warmth licked against my hands as I crouched near it, holding a metal mug of cheap instant coffee. Smoke curled into the dusky air, dancing with the scent of pine needles, moss, and damp earth. The kind of smell that makes you feel like the world's been washed clean. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to perform. No one to impress. No one to text back. No one to worry about second-guessing my silences or misreading my moods. Out here, I could just exist. But being alone in the forest is its own kind of honesty. As the firelight flickered, casting long shadows onto the surrounding trees, I felt it. That slight edge of unease. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Every creak of a branch or snap of twigs felt sharper, louder. The kind of noise that reminds you this isn't your world. It belongs to the deer, the foxes, the wind, and things older than all three. I told myself that's what I wanted. Silence, stillness, no people. And I really did. But sometimes silence doesn't feel peaceful. Feels like a waiting room, like the space between something ending and something starting. And I wasn't sure which one this was yet. I poked the fire with a stick, watching embers scatter upward into the sky like tiny fireflies. I hadn't seen another soul since I turned off the highway. No other tents. No hikers. Just the sound of the stream and the occasional rustle of something moving in the underbrush. Above me, the stars began to show, one by one, until the whole sky was freckled with them. Brighter than I ever saw back home. I leaned back against a log and let myself breathe in the cold air. Tasted like distance and freedom. Eventually, the fire dimmed to coals, and my mug sat empty beside me. I packed away anything that might attract wildlife, zipped up my food bag, and crawled into the tent. My sleeping bag was already laid out, slightly rumpled from earlier. I stripped down to my thermals, climbed in, and pulled the zipper up to my chin. That's when I heard it. Not loud, not close, just out there. A faint sound. Maybe a branch snapping under weight. Maybe nothing. I lay still, my breath slowing, ears straining against the quiet. Whatever it was, it didn't come closer. The forest settled again, folding back into the hush of crickets and moving water. I closed my eyes, let the dark take me. But something in my chest hummed, like the quiet wasn't done with me yet. At first, I thought it was the wind, a soft shuffle outside the tent, like something brushing the nylon or moving through the leaves. I blinked awake, heart already racing as my ears strained against the dark. The kind of sound that snaps you from the edge of sleep and leaves you hovering in a silent, uncertain panic. I held my breath. There it was again, this time more deliberate. A step, then another. Footsteps. Not the erratic rustle of an animal. Not the clumsy scuttle of a raccoon or the crunching dart of a deer. No, this was slower, heavier, paced. Someone walking just outside my tent. My throat went dry. I didn't move, barely dared to breathe. My fingers clenched the edge of the sleeping bag. Who the hell was out here? I hadn't seen another soul all day. I deliberately picked this remote spot to get away from everyone. And now someone was here, in the middle of the night, with no warning. Then the sound stopped. Silence. I could hear the stream still bubbling softly in the distance, the wind brushing through the trees. But the footsteps gone. I was just starting to think I imagined it when I heard the faintest metallic click. The zipper, right next to my head, right at the entrance of the tent. I shot upright. The sound was slow, deliberate, the long, tense draw of a zipper being pulled downward in the quiet woods. I scrambled for my flashlight, but my fingers fumbled in the dark. Before I could find it, the zipper reached the bottom. The flap shifted. Cold air slipped in. And then, a face. A man's silhouette, half illuminated by the moonlight spilling in behind him. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, framed by the tent opening, eyes wide, breathing shallow, one hand holding the zipper, the other gripping a small flashlight, not turned on. "Hey," he said quickly, lifting his free hand as if in surrender. "I didn't mean to scare you." My heart thundered so hard I felt it in my teeth. He stayed still just outside the tent. I could barely make out his features. Short brown hair pushed back beneath a hood, square jaw with some stubble, brows knitted in tension. He looked around mid-30s, maybe a few years older than me. His hiking jacket was dirty at the sleeves, and he had a small daypack slung over one shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said again, this time softer. I thought this site was empty." "You unzipped my tent?" I said flatly, still frozen. I know. He stepped back a little, hands up again. It looked like the place was deserted. No fire, no movement. I got lost, and I didn't know where else to go. The flashlight dangled from his fingers, still not on. His posture wasn't aggressive, just tired. Cold. Maybe embarrassed. I reached over and clicked on my own flashlight. The beam hit his chest first, hiking vest, carabiner clips, a compass tied to one strap, then his face. His eyes squinted against the sudden light. "I'm not here to rob you or anything," he added quickly. "I've been hiking all day. My map was garbage. I was trying to make it to a trailhead that doesn't exist anymore. I didn't see your tent until I was right on top of it." I kept the flashlight trained on him but softened my tone. "So, you figured you'd unzip a stranger's tent in the middle of the night?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Fair. Not my best idea." We stared at each other in the silence that followed. His breath came out in soft clouds in the cold air. There was something oddly disarming about him. His voice wasn't threatening, just real. A little shaken, a little sheepish. I finally exhaled. "You're lucky I'm not the paranoid type." He gave a quick laugh under his breath. "Yeah, could have been worse. Could have been a bear. Bears don't unzip tents," he said with a smirk. There was a pause. Then I sighed and leaned back slightly. The adrenaline was still pulsing in my veins, but the immediate fear had faded. All that was left now was this strange sense of curiosity. Who the hell just wanders into someone's tent at midnight and manages to look apologetic about it? I clicked off my flashlight. "Look, you obviously can't keep walking around out there. You'll break your ankle in the dark." His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Do you mind if I stay nearby? I got my own tent. I just needed to know I wasn't gonna freeze to death out here." "You got any food?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I'm not that lost." I hesitated for a second longer, then pushed the flap open wider. "Pitch your tent over there by the second log. Stream's downhill. If you hear something howling, it's not me." A grin tugged at the edge of his mouth. "Got it. Thank you." "Really?" I didn't answer. I just watched as he backed away and started pulling gear from his pack, setting up quietly like someone used to being alone. His movements were efficient, practiced. Eventually, I zipped my tent back up and lay down again. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, but the sleep wasn't coming easy. There was a man sleeping 20 feet from me. A man I'd never met. A man who, 20 minutes ago, unzipped my tent in the dark. And yet, I didn't feel unsafe anymore, just curious. The morning was colder than I expected. A thin mist clung to the ground, curling around the trees like breath held too long. My fire from the night before had burned out completely, leaving behind soft gray ash and a few smoldering coals. I huddled in my jacket, hands shoved deep into my pockets, and stared at the embers like they owed me warmth. That's when I heard the tent unzip again. Not mine this time. I turned just as the guy from last night crawled out, stretching his arms over his head with a groan. His hoodie rode up slightly, revealing a narrow waist and toned back. He looked lived in, like someone used to early mornings and cold air. "Morning," he said, voice still rough with sleep. "Surprised you didn't freeze to death," I replied, half joking. "I considered spooning my backpack," he said. "Didn't seem like it would consent." I let out a dry laugh. He grinned, brushing his hair back with one hand, and moved toward the fire pit. "You mind if I warm up here?" he asked. I gestured toward the log across from mine. "Be my guest." Uninvited guest. But still. He gave me a sheepish look as he sat down. Fair. That was probably the creepiest way I've ever introduced myself. "Definitely top 5 creepiest things to wake up to," I said, then added. "But you didn't scream, so I figured you were at least half normal." "Appreciate the benefit of the doubt." He held out his hand across the fire. "Mason." I shook it. His grip was warm, rougher than mine. "Tyler." We sat in comfortable silence for a beat, watching the coals fade into gray. I poured hot water into 2 metal mugs and dropped a tea bag in each, pushing one across to him. He took it, nodding his thanks. "So, Tyler, what brings a guy like you out into the middle of nowhere? Heartbreak? Quarter-life crisis? Witness protection?" "Kind of all 3, I said, wrapping my hands around my mug. "Mostly needed to get away. Reset." He nodded. "Yeah, I get that. I was doing a week-long solo trek through the ridge trails, trying to map a loop I'd never done. Thought I'd take a shortcut. Spoiler, it wasn't one." "Is that what you tell all the campers whose tents you unzip?" "Only the cute ones," he said, sipping his tea without missing a beat. I blinked. He met my eyes and smiled over the rim of his mug. "Okay." Noted. The tension in my chest shifted. Still present, but lighter now, like curiosity stretching its limbs. "Smooth," I said. "I try." We sat with that for a while. No need to rush. The kind of silence that didn't feel awkward, just full, like the woods were listening. "So you do this a lot?" I asked. "Camping alone?" "Yeah," he said. "City's too loud. People are too much. Out here, I remember how to breathe." I nodded slowly. "Same." There was a pause, then Mason chuckled. "I mean, not usually with unplanned tent invasions. That was a first. But I swear, I really thought the site was empty. Your tent blended in. The fire was out. No noise. Just looked abandoned. Right? Because nothing says abandoned like a zipped-up tent in the middle of the night." I teased. He held up his hands. I panicked. Poor life choices were made. I couldn't help it. I laughed again. His energy was easy, steady. The kind of person who wasn't trying too hard, but didn't shrink away either. As we talked, I noticed the little things. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. How he tapped his fingers against the metal mug when he was thinking. How he leaned forward when he listened, like he actually cared what I was saying. And then, while passing me the small container of instant oatmeal, our fingers brushed. Just barely, but enough to send a jolt up my arm. We both paused for half a second. He looked at me, really looked, and the world around us felt a bit quieter. I broke the gaze first, stirring my oatmeal like it held the answers to life. "So," I said casually, "what's the plan now? You gonna try to find that mythical trailhead again?" "Not today," he said. "I'll stick close to your camp. Regain some dignity." "You're assuming you had dignity to start with." "Fair," he said with a grin. "I'm still recovering from the image of me standing like a serial killer over your tent flap. That'll take some time to shake." "I'll make it up to you," he said. "Camp chores, fire duty, emotional support if a raccoon stares you down." "Generous," I said, smiling despite myself. The morning stretched on. He helped gather wood, filled our bottles at the stream, and even offered me some trail mix he swore was spiritually healing. I didn't ask questions. I just accepted it. At some point, it stopped feeling like I was alone. We spent most of the day near camp, talking and occasionally lapsing into silence. I told him about my ex in broad strokes. He didn't push for details, just nodded like he understood what that kind of quiet heartbreak looked like. He shared a bit too. Nothing heavy, but enough to know he wasn't just wandering out here for fun. We both had our ghosts. By evening, the sun dipped low, turning the trees gold. We made a small fire again and sat close, not touching, but close enough that I felt the edge of his warmth in the space between us. "You sure you're okay with me camping here tonight?" he asked as the stars started to appear. "I didn't hike all the way out here to die of awkward silence," I said. "Besides, I think the woods approve of you." "That's all I need," he said softly. Eventually, the fire burned low. He stood, stretched, and turned toward his tent. "Night, Tyler." "Night, Mason." He paused, then added, "Thanks for letting me stay." "I mean it." I nodded, watching him disappear into the tent. The zipper buzzed quietly, then silence again. I lay in my own tent later, staring at the thin ceiling of fabric above me, hearing the faintest rustle from his side of camp. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just chance, just company. But something about him had curled under my skin. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. The kind of presence that lingers. The kind you don't expect to find in the woods. I woke to birdsong and the soft sound of footsteps near the stream. For a moment, I forgot where I was, until the smell of pine hit me again and I heard the bubbling water. And then I remembered. Mason. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. There he was, kneeling by the water, filling his bottle. The early sun was just cresting through the trees, catching the edges of his face in soft gold. He looked peaceful in that moment, like he belonged here more than anywhere else. "Morning again," he said, glancing over his shoulder without missing a beat. "You always this cheerful at sunrise?" I asked, stretching. "Only when I haven't been eaten by raccoons in the night." "Lucky you." After breakfast, instant oats and some suspiciously healthy granola he insisted I try. He stood up, brushed the dirt from his pants and said, "So, want to see something cool?" I raised a brow. "That's a dangerous question." "Relax. No tent unzipping this time," he said with a smirk. "There's a hidden trail a few clicks from here. If I'm right, it leads to a waterfall. Want to check it out?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, let's go get lost again." We packed light, just water, snacks, and a small first aid kit he insisted on carrying because, as he said, "You look like the type who trips over flat ground." I did not argue. I just rolled my eyes and followed him into the woods. The trail wasn't really a trail at all. More like a faint impression between trees, half lost under ferns and fallen leaves. Mason led the way, occasionally glancing down at his compass or muttering something about landmarks he remembered. "You ever think about just using GPS?" I asked. He snorted. "And miss out on the thrill of wandering blindly through snake-infested undergrowth?" "Never." His sarcasm was oddly comforting. As we walked, the forest shifted from dense pine to more open oak and birch. The light filtered differently here, softer, more golden, casting long shadows that danced with every breeze. He offered me a hand when we had to scramble over a log, and I took it without thinking. His grip was steady, warm. I tried not to hold it too long. A little while later, we paused to drink and share an energy bar. Something almond and date-based that tasted better than I expected. We sat on a mossy rock, shoulders brushing now and then as we passed the bottle between us. "You always this prepared?" I asked, nodding at his pack. "I like to be ready," he said. "The outdoors doesn't care if you forget sunscreen or twist your ankle. You learn fast out here." "Fair." He looked at me for a second, then added, "Plus, when I'm out here, I feel like I can actually be myself." There was a quiet beat in the air after that, One of those silences that says more than words. We continued hiking, and soon I heard it. Faint at first, then growing louder. The sound of falling water. "Don't tell me it actually exists," I said. He grinned. "Told you I wasn't totally lost." The trees opened up into a small clearing. And there it was. A waterfall, maybe 15 feet high, spilling down slick stone into a clear, shallow pool below. Sunlight caught the mist, turning it into soft rainbows in the air. The place looked untouched, like something out of a dream. We stood there for a moment, just taking it in. Then Mason stepped forward and said, "Come on. Best views from that rock." We climbed onto a wide, flat boulder near the water's edge. The stone was warm under us, the sound of the falls loud enough to make conversation just a little intimate by necessity. We sat close, knees almost touching. "This is your secret spot now," he said. "Claim it before Instagram does." I smiled, then looked out over the water. "Thanks for showing me." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I used to come out here with my brother. Years ago." I turned to him, sensing the shift in his tone. "We weren't close when we were kids," he continued. "Different personalities, different everything. But camping trips, those were the one time we didn't fight. We'd hike out for miles, make terrible coffee, and just talk about stuff we couldn't say anywhere else." I didn't interrupt. "He passed away 2 years ago. Accident. Quick. No warning." I looked over. His jaw was tight, eyes focused on the water, not on me. "I guess I keep doing these hikes to feel like I'm still talking to him," he said. "Still keeping the promise to show him places he never got to see." Something heavy and warm settled in my chest. "I'm sorry," I said. He nodded, not needing anything else from me. A moment later, he looked at me again, softer now. "What about you? What were you running from when you came out here?" I hesitated. But something about this place, the quiet, the space, him, made it easier to speak. "A guy," I said. "Someone I thought I could trust." It wasn't even a dramatic breakup. Just cold, distant. Like I stopped existing to him before it was even over. Mason didn't say anything, but he didn't look away. "I guess I came out here to remember who I was before all that," I added. "Before I started shrinking to fit into someone else's life." We sat in silence after that, just the waterfall talking for us. I turned toward him, and for a second we were eye to eye. Closer than we had been. There was something charged in the air between us. Not loud or obvious, but undeniable. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to close the space. But I didn't. Fear, maybe. Or respect. Or both. He seemed to sense it too. His lips parted like he might say something. But instead, he looked away and cleared his throat. "We should probably head back," he said. "Looks like rain's coming." He wasn't wrong. The clouds had thickened while we sat. By the time we re-entered the tree line, the first drops had started to fall, soft and infrequent at first, then all at once, poured. We burst out laughing, stumbling through mud and branches as the sky soaked us through. Mason reached for my hand as I slipped on a wet root, pulling me upright just in time. "Careful," he shouted over the rain. "You jinxed it," I shouted back, grinning. We didn't stop running until we reached camp. Both of us breathless, dripping and laughing like idiots. He grabbed the tent flap and held it open. "In you go." I dove inside, collapsing onto my sleeping bag, water splattering everywhere. He followed, ducking in and zipping the flap shut behind him. The sound of rain pounding against the nylon surrounded us. Inside, it was warm with our shared breath and wet clothes. Our laughter faded into a quiet that pulsed with something deeper. We sat there, close again, knees touching. His hair was soaked, sticking to his forehead. My shirt clung to me, cold and clammy. We didn't say anything. We just looked at each other. Not touching. Not yet. But something had shifted. Something had started. The tent was never meant for two people. Not comfortably, anyway. We sat facing each other, knees bent, soaked clothes clinging to our skin. The rain hammered above us, a steady rhythm on the nylon like fingers drumming against a drumhead. Outside, the forest blurred into a gray mist, but inside, it was just us. Two bodies, two heartbeats, one thin wall between us and the wilderness. Mason pulled off his hoodie, wringing it out just outside the tent flap before tossing it toward the corner. I peeled off my wet shirt with a grimace. It was cold enough to make my skin prickle, but there wasn't much choice. "Here," he said, reaching into his pack. "Emergency blanket." He pulled out one of those foil-lined, heat-trapping survival blankets, except this one wasn't the usual crinkly kind. It was insulated, dark green, with a soft fleece lining. He shook it out and spread it across both our shoulders. I hesitated a beat before leaning in under it, shoulder to shoulder now, our bare arms grazing. A flicker of warmth passed between us. "Not just from the blanket. Remind me again why we thought a waterfall hike was a good idea," I muttered, trying to sound casual. "Because you trusted a guy who unzipped your tent in the dark." "Ah, right. My mistake." He chuckled. His arm pressed slightly more against mine. Neither of us moved away. The space between us filled with the scent of rain-drenched earth, pine, and whatever soap he used. Something clean and subtle, like cedar and mint. His skin was warm against mine. Not from the blanket, just him. The rain kept falling. I shifted slightly, adjusting the blanket higher on my shoulders. As I did, my knee bumped his. He didn't move it. Neither did I. We sat like that for a long while, listening, breathing, the kind of silence that doesn't beg to be broken. Eventually, I glanced at him. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, lips parted just slightly. Water still clung to his eyelashes. There was something so effortlessly open about him in that moment. No walls, no tension, just a man who existed fully in the space he took up. I envied it, and maybe I wanted to be part of it. "I don't usually do this," I said quietly. His eyes opened and turned toward me, soft and curious. "What? Sit in tents with strangers after a rainstorm?" I gave a small laugh. "No. I mean, I don't usually feel this. Okay. With someone." His smile faded, but not in a bad way. He leaned in slightly, brows drawing together. Not confused, just listening. "I'm used to people needing me to shrink," I continued, "to take up less space, be quieter, easier to digest." I wasn't sure why I said it. The words just came. Mason didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he shifted, turning more fully toward me. Our legs brushed again. His voice, when it came, was low. "I don't want you to be smaller." I blinked. "I like the way you take up space," he added. "Even when you're quiet." The breath caught in my throat. For a second, everything else fell away. The sound of the rain, the cold, the awkward dampness of my jeans. Just that one sentence. And him. His hand moved, slow and deliberate, resting lightly on top of mine beneath the blanket. His thumb brushed across my knuckles once. Soft, not asking for anything. Just being there. I didn't pull away. Couldn't. It wasn't some dramatic spark. No firework moment or movie magic kiss. It was gentler than that. Quieter. A shift in gravity. A warmth that started in my chest and bloomed outward. "I've been alone for a while," I said, voice just above a whisper. "Even when I wasn't." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. "I'm not trying to rush anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know you're safe here. With me." That did something to me. Made something in me unclench I didn't know had been tight for years. I looked at him, really looked, and felt the weight of his presence settle beside me. Solid, steady, kind. He leaned in a little more, just a few inches, like he was thinking about closing the space. I felt the pull, too. My heart thudded loud in my chest. But he didn't kiss me. He stopped just short. Let it hang in the air between us like a question we didn't need to answer yet. Instead, he pulled the blanket tighter around us both and let his forehead rest lightly against mine. And we just sat there, breathing the same air, not needing anything else in that moment. The rain slowed. I barely noticed. Outside, the forest exhaled. Mist curling low, birds beginning to stir again. The sun peeked through the clouds, turning the tent walls a soft gold. Inside, we didn't move. Not right away. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was something else. Something whole. Eventually, Mason pulled back slightly and smiled at me. Not big. Just enough. "I think the rain stopped," he said. I murmured, not quite ready to let go of the quiet. We didn't rush. We didn't speak. We just stayed. Let the moment settle around us like the fog on the trees. Close, warm, connected. And, for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be anywhere else. We didn't talk about it. Not the closeness in the tent. Not the way our foreheads rested together as the storm passed. Not the brush of fingers or the shared blanket that lingered too long. We just let the day unfold. The sky cleared around noon, leaving the forest dripping and shimmering. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, spotlighting patches of moss and gold-lit leaves. The air smelled clean again, like washed bark and new beginnings. We both moved slower that day, not out of fatigue but intention. Our words were quieter, less teasing, but still warm. Still us. Late afternoon drifted into evening and we decided, maybe silently, that this night deserved a fire. Felt right, like the last page of a chapter you don't want to end just yet. Mason gathered wood. I stacked stones for a makeshift ring. We didn't say it aloud, but we both knew. This was his last night at camp. He'd be continuing his hike in the morning, and I'd be heading back to my car, my apartment, my other life. The flames crackled to life as dusk melted into night. We sat across from each other again, mugs of tea in hand, the orange glow flickering against his cheekbones. Shadows danced behind him, long and gentle. "So," I said, swirling the tea, "what do you do when you're not hiking through other people's campsites?" He grinned. "I'm a high school English teacher." I blinked. "Seriously? Why is that surprising?" "I don't know," I said. "You just seem like the type who builds cabins in the woods or lives out of a converted van." He laughed. "I do have a van, but it's mostly full of grating and granola bars." I smiled. "So, Mr. Mason, what do you teach?" "Literature. Creative writing. Some days I just try to keep teenagers from stabbing each other with pens." "That tracks." He looked across the fire at me for a long moment. "You've got this way of seeing things, like you're paying attention to everything, even when you pretend not to be." I felt my face go warm. I used to write. Before the relationship. Before I stopped. "You should start again." His voice was quiet, sincere. No pressure in it. Just belief. And somehow that made it even harder to shrug off. "I'll think about it," I murmured. The fire popped. Sparks floated up into the sky like tiny stars. The temperature dropped, wrapping the forest in a soft chill. I pulled my blanket tighter, and Mason stood, walked over, and sat beside me without asking. Closer than earlier. Our shoulders pressed together. I didn't move. Neither did he. The silence between us was deep, but not empty. It hummed with something electric and unspoken. I could hear the beat of my own heart in my ears. Loud. Alive. "I'm glad I got lost," he said, his voice just above a whisper. I turned slightly toward him. His eyes found mine, dark in the firelight, but steady. "I don't usually let people in," I said. "I know." He lifted a hand, moved slowly, and brushed his fingertips across my cheek. Just once. A gentle line, barely a whisper of contact. I didn't flinch. I leaned into it. His hand rested there for a second longer, warm and grounding. I saw it in his expression then, that careful question behind his eyes. That silent, open-ended ask, "Is this okay?" I answered by leaning forward. Not much, just enough. And then he met me halfway. The kiss wasn't rushed. It didn't crash or burn. It unfolded soft, slow, deliberate. His lips were warm, tasting faintly of mint tea and wood smoke. One hand cupped the back of my neck, the other rested lightly against my side. I melted into the space between us, let go of every voice that ever said I was too much or not enough. It wasn't about fire or lust. It was about home. We kissed again, deeper this time though still careful, still wrapped in that same quiet magic. When we pulled back, he didn't speak. Neither did I. He just pulled me gently against his side, and I rested my head on his shoulder as the fire burned lower. We sat like that for a long time. No words, no need, just the fire, the forest, and us. I woke to birdsong again, but this time I wasn't alone. The morning sun filtered through the tent walls, casting everything in soft amber light. I could see the steam of our breaths in the cool air. Mason was beside me, still half asleep, his arm resting lightly over my waist. We hadn't spoken much after the fire last night. Not after the kiss, or the way he pulled me close, or the way our hands had fit together like we'd done this before, in another life. But everything had been said without words. Now we just lay there, sharing warmth and silence, our legs tangled under the blanket. His eyes blinked open slowly, adjusting to the light. "Morning," he whispered, his voice husky. "Morning," I whispered back. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just looked at each other like we were trying to memorize the shape of what this had become. Eventually, he sat up, rubbing his face and stretching with a soft groan. "Today's the day, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah." He looked over at me, something wistful in his eyes. "I've got a few more days left on my route. Thought I'd make it up to Eagle Point before heading back to civilization. And I've got a 2-hour hike back to my car and a week's worth of emails waiting." "That sounds tragic," he said, smirking. "It is." We packed up slowly, neither of us rushing. Every motion felt like a quiet negotiation with time, trying to draw out the moments before the inevitable. When I pulled the last of my gear into my pack, Mason handed me his phone. "Give me your number," he said, "so I can prove I didn't hallucinate you." I chuckled and typed it in. "Only if you promise not to text me tent-related pickup lines." "No promises," he said, pocketing the phone. I offered mine next. He entered his number and added a photo. One he snapped just then of me squinting into the sun, smiling despite myself. "Insurance," he said. "In case I need a reminder this wasn't just a weird forest fever dream." We zipped our tents, checked the fire ring, did the quiet, respectful cleanup of people who'd learned to tread lightly in nature. Then we stood at the trail split. His path led uphill into dense trees. Mine veered down toward the ridge and the road below. I didn't know what to say. Everything I wanted to say felt too big for words, too small for this space. "I'm glad you got lost," I said finally. He smiled, warm and open. "Me too." We stood there a little longer than we needed to. Then he leaned in and pressed one last kiss to my cheek. Light, deliberate, lingering. "See you around, Tyler." And just like that, he turned and started up the trail. I watched him go, watched the shape of him shrink between the trees, his pack swaying with each step, his body folding into the forest like he'd always been part of it. When he vanished around a bend, I exhaled. The trail behind me felt familiar, but I knew I wasn't the same person walking it now. As I hiked back toward the edge of the world I thought I'd escaped from, I felt lighter. Not because everything had changed, but because something in me had shifted. Sometimes the best parts of life aren't planned. Sometimes they unzip your tent in the middle of the night, uninvited, unexpected, and you let them in. And maybe, just maybe, you're better for it. Home didn't feel quite the same when I got back. My apartment still smelled like dust and old coffee grounds. The pile of mail on the counter hadn't moved. My bed was still made the way I'd left it. Tightly, too neatly, like a hotel room that had never known comfort. But something in me had shifted. The quiet here was different from the forest. In the woods, silence felt alive, full of wind and leaves and breath and memory. Here it felt like absence. Still, I settled in, made tea, let myself take things slow. I didn't expect to hear from him. Not really. I'd been trying not to check my phone too much. Trying not to reread the last message I'd sent after the hike. "Thanks for getting lost near me." I'd added a little pine tree emoji at the end. Dumb, but it felt like us. That morning, I sat by the window with a mug in my hand, staring at the rust-colored brick buildings outside and missing the green. The gray sky pressed down like a ceiling too low for dreaming. Then my phone buzzed. Just once. A message from a number I hadn't seen in 3 days. Mason. Found another waterfall. Wish you were here. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not smiling at first. Just holding it. Letting the words sink in. I imagined him somewhere out there. Still hiking, probably brushing branches aside as he picked his way up another ridge. Maybe soaked with sweat. Maybe standing at the edge of some hidden spring. Face tipped toward the sky. And I wasn't there. But he'd thought of me. I smiled then, small, real. Some stories don't need endings to matter. Some don't ask for forever. They just arrive when they're supposed to. Unfold gently across your chest like sunlight after rain, and leave behind something warm. Something alive. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the wild brings you exactly who you need. Even if just for a chapter. What would you have done if someone unzipped your tent in the middle of the night and turned out to be someone like Mason? Let me know in the comments, was this just a moment in time or the start of something real?